Points are good, and the Pacers scored a lot of them, 133, in fact, to beat the Pistons Wednesday night. They're back in the States. They're back rolling on offense, and Pascal Siakam was amazing in a Chippy game. We have a lot to discuss on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Thursday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, much to discuss from the Pacers' victory over the Detroit Pistons. They win the season series, actually very important. Those teams somewhat close in the standings. Pacers get a key tiebreaker win there with that game, and it was a crazy night in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Some fun stuff going on. I met a lot of fans. Pascal Siakam was incredible, 37 points. The game was very chippy, a ton of technical fouls, all deserved. Tyrese Haliburton was aggressive, getting to the rim. TJ McConnell stepped up in a big way with some other guards out. A very story-filled game with lots of directions to go. And my theme for today, not to make it about me, I'm going to use myself as a conduit to get to my points, is that I am taking a bunch of L's today on stuff I've recently said. Number one thing that I have been recently mentioning, including yesterday, is the following stat in my Pascal Siakam All-Star rants. I have said many times, the thing holding him back the most may be that he has not yet scored 30 points in a game this season. He's been so consistently between 20 and 30, but has never hit 30. Sayonara to that stat. Tony, you can shut up. Siakam was amazing in this win over the Pistons. 37 points, his season high and his Pacer high. His previous high was 36 in a win over the Lakers last March for the Pacers. Now that number is 37. He was awesome and really carried the Pacers in a meaningful way. And the story of this night, his night, to me, starts before the game even started, because I asked JB Bickerstaff, and like full inside baseball disclosure, I wanted some quotes on like Siakam and what makes him so great for a potential all-star story I would have to do this week. So I asked JB Bickerstaff, the Pistons head coach, about him before the game. And, Bickerstaff's gone against the Pacers pre and post Siakam. He was with the Cavs, and he said he's just very versatile and he's a tough cover. And then he hinted at something. He said, he's so fast and has size that sometimes you want to guard him with fours, but his size makes you want to put fives on him. So it's just a tricky matchup. And they opted for, in this game, putting a 5 on him, which is not something I expected to happen in this game. This was not a permanent alignment from the Detroit Pistons, but there was enough of the game where they had Jalen Duren on Siakam. And that, to me, is very fascinating, because the rest of their team, Ausar Thompson's good. He's a little on the small side to guard Siakam. Tobias Harris seems like the perfect size guy. They put him elsewhere for much of the game. And basically everybody else who played for the Pistons in this game is either very clearly a guard or a 5. So they didn't have a lot of options to put on Pascal Siakam in this game, unless they were wanting to give up size or speed. And that allowed Siakam to just dominate the game. And so JB Bickerstaff kind of tipped that he knew it would be a tough matchup, and it was. And they never doubled. They very rarely doubled, I would say. And so Siakam could just get to turnaround jumpers all night, right? This season, has so many things have made him more effective as a scorer this season, right? I think his post-up play is better. When he gets the mismatch, he gets in position and makes it happen. He's very good at those duck-ins where someone else is driving and he knows the exact timing to just step to the side or cut in from the perimeter and get a pass and score in the lane. He's mastered the spin moves. Everybody knows all that stuff. But that is usually what his nights look like when he's at 20 to 25, 30 points, is some nice mid-range buckets with a lot of the stuff I just said, or he's posting up a mismatch or, receiving passes in the lane at the right time and making plays from there. Tonight, it was not that at all. He just steady all night said, screw you guys. I'm going to hit mid-range jumpers in your face for 31 and a half minutes. And he did it. 11 for 14 on twos is amazing. 4 for 7 on threes. That obviously played a big role in him finally climbing over the 30-point mark, although he could have made 2 of his 7 threes. He still would have made it. But the way he was hitting these jumpers was just like, what are you supposed to do? if you're the Detroit Pistons, if you open a shot chart, you'll see he hit 6 2-point shots that were not right at the basket. He made 5 at the basket, obviously. He still did a wonderful job getting to his spots inside the arc, but 6 mid-range, in-your-face, good luck guarding this jumpers that he just canned right over the top of a Pistons player. What they did never came with the doubles. They went to zone sometimes. That has been a nice Siakam counter for some teams. They tried a lot of stuff. None of it worked. None of it worked. And so finally, my junk stat about Pascal Siakam not having a 30-point game this year. It's over. 37. He thinks he could have got 40. Tyrese Haliburton made that joke after the game as well. One more made 3 or a couple more buckets here or there. He could have done it, and he would have earned it. He played that well. He played well enough to be like, yeah, a 40-point game was totally reasonable. And these kind of games where the opposing team doesn't have answers for Siakam, everybody should and will talk about the team's best passers being guys who, when they draw that kind of attention, make everything easier than everybody else. But when Siakam is playing that well, he's going to draw the best large defender for the other team, and that makes life easier for other players, which was important in this game because we'll talk about this more later, but no Andrew Nembhard and no Ben Mathurin for the Pacers, both on shorter-term injuries right now, meant that there were fewer ball handlers, right? That's 2 of the Pacers' best 4 ball handlers probably this season, and so they had to rely on the occasional dribble drive from Ben Shepherd or Myles Turner or Aaron Nesmith or any combo of guys, and that's fine and dandy. Those guys did okay, but you'd like to see that be easier for them, or you'd like to see Siakam punish his chances, and he did. He punched his chances and punished the Pistons defense, and everyone else was able to at least get something going, right? The Pacers still found a way to get up 43 2-point shots and 31 free throws. Like, they were still finding success inside the arc despite not having as many ball handlers, and they made it happen. For only 44 points in the paint does sort of tell you that without that rim pressure they could normally get, and a lot of their points in the paint came from Haliburton setup stuff. His rim pressure was actually pretty good in this game. They needed another way to score. And Siakam, via gravity, without, he shot at 4 for 7 in this game. Without having the perception of being a knockdown shooter, he still provides a ton of gravity, basically 15 feet and out, because of how effective he is and was in this game as a scorer. And he himself was terrific. He made life easier for everybody on the offensive end in this game. He also defended very well in this game. He had all sorts of different matchups at different times. Tobias Harris shot 42%, even though it felt like he made a billion shots, and no one on Detroit outside of Jalen Duren actually shot it particularly well. Cade was at 54%, didn't get going from deep. And Malik Beasley was hitting threes, but only threes. He did not make a 2-point shot. Those are like solid finishing nights. They're just different in terms of defensive perception. Siakam had the Harris matchup at times, had Thompson at times, had Fontecchio at times, and none of those guys are absurdly threatening, but they're good players. None of them ever got going. What did that lead to for Siakam? Obviously, 37 points, a season high for him, a Pacers high for him, which he did not know. He said after the game, oh, interesting, when I asked him the question about it. But that led to a plus 32 night for Pascal Siakam. No one else in the Pacers was above plus 20. That was Aaron Nesmith. And after him was Haliburton at plus 15 and Shepherd at plus 13. Everybody else well below plus 10. I know single game plus minus is not necessarily indicative of how well a player played. You can play well and get caught in bad lineups, and the opposite is true as well. But I always say, like, if Siakam was worse, he wouldn't have been plus 32. And if he was better, he would have been more. Like, you can start at the plus minus and then move what you feel like it should be based on how they played and land on a reasonable thing. And that is how you get to, beyond all the other stuff I said, Siakam just dominating this game. Because the Pacers lost the minutes, he was not on the floor by a lot. Plus 32 and a 14-point win means they lost his non-minutes, by 18. And he was only on the floor for 17 and a half minutes. And there's 16 and a half minutes in this game. The Pacers got outscored by over a point per minute with Pascal Siakam on the bench in this game and crushed the Pistons when he was out there. The game was put away early in the fourth quarter when he came back in to destroy the Pistons and get the Pacers lead back over 10 points. It got within 6 again, but Siakam comfortable all the time, punishing, played with force in a chippy game. Loves to make it about hoop when there's beefs like this, and he let his game do the talking, and his game changed everything for the Pacers. They needed someone to be awesome, given who was unavailable for them in this game, and they got it via Pascal Siakam, who was terrific. And we'll find out later today, assuming you're listening to this the morning or day it comes out, if he is named an all-star reserve for 2025. I think he should be. I think that, and by think that I mean this has to be the case. Basically, it basically is required that the votes would be submitted by coaches before Wednesday, or else it'd be really hard for the league to scramble and get all that figured out. But regardless, so I say that to say I don't necessarily know that this like bolstered his All-Star case unless he's going to be a replacement. But regardless, on the eve of the day before the last game before All-Star reserves are announced, Siakam had an All-Star, maybe All-NBA level performance. He was awesome. And that guided the Pacers' terrific offense. Tyrese Haliburton was awesome as well. And this game got chippy. I want to get to those two things coming up right here on Locked On Pacers. Before we talk about any of that, though, I want to talk to you guys about TurboTax. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and worrying if you were ever going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com, only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Make your second listen Locked On Kings. De'Aaron Fox wants to be traded. He said close to that on the record in Philly, which is nuts. And then they lost to the Sixers last night. Hear from Matt George on Locked On Kings about the latest on how all that ties together. And the Sixers playing kind of decent now. Maybe they're going to get into the plan. We'll see. Good for them. Locked On Sixers could also be your second listen. Let's keep going here on Pacers. Pistons, the Siakam of it, had to get to that. He was their best player, most reliable, impactful. But Tyrese Haliburton was special in this game. He did so much well on the offensive end. 4 for 9 from deep. That's like a normal night for him the last month and a half. 10 for 17 in total, which means he was 6 for 8 on twos. That's very good and bleeds right into where I would like to lead with him. And that's that he was very aggressive with his drives. And sometimes I think it's overstated a little bit how important it is for him to attack the paint and be aggressive, air quotes. I never really know what people mean when they say aggressive. Lots of aggressive things don't come off as flash or anything, but of his 2-point shots, only one was free throw line and out, and I think he drew a foul on that shot and still hit. No, that was his buzzer beater at halftime, excuse me. All the rest of his 2-point makes right at the rim, made 4 threes, all from the right side at the top of the key, right? It was very Haliburton-esque in the way he was able to get to his shots because, to me, he was playing paint in to out. When he plays that way, he can make the passes he likes, and he did. He had 8 assists in this game. He can get shots he likes, which he did. He took 17 of them in this game. And when he's confident, he'll make them. And he did that. He had 30 points in this game. Only 1 turnover. Terrific outing. He and Siakam combined 67. The Pacers scored 133. That means the two stars had over half of the Pacers' points in this game. That's not like atypical around the NBA. Like if you have 2 really good players, that might happen so often. But it felt that way in a way that was special, right? Sometimes it feels like they have big nights, but it's spread out. You don't feel it. Like Haliburton hit big shots and, was celebrating on the floor. And Siakam had the loudest, in a good way, game he's played for the franchise from a scoring perspective. And they combined to go 25 for 38. They combined to make 8 threes on their way to that 67 point, 13 rebound, 12 assists combined total. Haliburton was awesome, right? The way he was able to penetrate all the time, regardless of if Siakam was with him or not, allowed him to be great in this basketball game, especially, like I mentioned, at scoring. 30 points. When he and Siakam both hit 30, I have to imagine the Pacers' record is very good, and they both did in this game. The Pistons, like with Siakam, had no answers for him. They have bodies that make sense to put on Tyrese Haliburton, but the amount of times the Pistons switch or the amount of times that their defense gets compromised and someone gets put in a horrible spot where they have to defend a Tyrese Haliburton one-on-one situation or do their best to defend a pick and roll in a setup that they've never done before. Haliburton just torched those guys all night, got into the paint, set up his teammates, hit big threes. He took a heat check. You always can tell when it's coming with him. He did Malik Beasley's shimmy after hitting a 3 in the fourth quarter. Bad blood coming from that. He was awesome. He was just such an entertainer in this game, and it was big time for the Pacers, who, as good as Siakam was, he had 4 assists. That's great, but no one thinks of him as that kind of creator for others. whereas that is what Haliburton does on this team. Him and Ben Shepherd were the top 2 assisters for the Pacers in this game. So I thought Haliburton was terrific, not as special as Pascal, not as far above expectation, I would say, at least the expectation set last year. Siakam's been better this season. But he was terrific. It was massive for the Pacers that it went that way. And Tyrese Haliburton wouldn't have got to 30 points if it weren't for technical fouls, free throws he got in this game. And that's the other thing I wanted to talk about in the second segment as we hit the highs of the game. Siakam, the biggest high, Haliburton second. The chippiness has to be up there as well. Some of you would say that's first. It was a very dramatic game, right? If you went as a neutral, you had a lot of fun because there was a lot that went into this. And this is where I had to take my second L. My first one was on the Siakam 30-point game stat. The second one is me saying it feels like a lot of these beef games get overstated. And I thought I made pretty compelling cases with past evidence of Heat and Bucks games with the Pacers, and I could dig up more if I wanted to. So I thought this would be, pretty timid. There'd be some chatter at some point. Everybody would get separated, blah, blah, blah. That happens. No. These teams hate each other or do not like each other. Isaiah Stewart comes in. He hasn't been in that long. Thomas Bryant comes in right after him. They're standing next to each other during a free throw, and Thomas Bryant's giving Isaiah Stewart this look like, what are you doing? Are you serious? I don't know who he was talking to, who Beef Stew was talking to, or what was going on in that exact moment. But it was very funny because the rest of the game, everybody was looking at Isaiah Stewart like that. He only played under 8 minutes, 7 minutes, and 46 seconds for Isaiah Stewart before he got ejected. His first tech coming as the Pacers called timeout. Their players are walking onto the floor. Him and James Johnson get into some sort of verbal spat. Both players are issued a technical foul for it, which without knowing what was said, but just seeing what we could see from our media seats. Yeah, that was the right call. No problem there. I feel like, they were both up and ready to go. But the one that got the Pistons and Isaiah Stewart in trouble was in the second quarter, unprompted for no reason. Guy from his hometown, right? You can look that up. Rochester for both Thomas Bryant and Isaiah Stewart. And Isaiah Stewart just, after a bucket, just clocked Thomas Bryant. Got the shoulder back, boom, on the way through. The officials review it and say it meets the criteria for a flagrant 2 because of the intent, the windup. I forget the third thing. There was 3. And I don't think that's wrong at all. So he might have got ejected just from that play, even without the first tech. But like the experience the Pacers had against the Cavs, you can get multiple infractions like that in one go. So Isaiah Stewart was gone at that point, but there was certainly beef, right? He was getting at Chippy, getting both teams up and ready to go, and then that never really faded. The Pistons kept it close, but they were losing the whole game, but the Pacers held them away, and we saw texts for JB Bickerstaff, the Pistons head coach, who was quite argumentative with officials in this game. Cade Cunningham got a technical foul for getting into it with an official. Tim Hardaway Jr. got a tech. He got in a scuffle with Siakam and Turner. Turner got a tech because he grabbed Beasley, I believe, running back in transition after Beasley bumped Turner. I mean, there were techs flying in this game. A lot of free points for both teams as that kind of all came to fruition. And, last game we saw what happened at the end with the Stewart yelling at the players and then the coaching staff's right in front of me. And there's something going on there. Like, these teams don't like each other and they have to play each other 4 times a season. And I'm glad that division rivalries are coming back. We saw this with the Pacers last year with the Bucks, but this got too much, right? And I said yesterday, these games never really get to this point. This one did, right? It got over the top. There was a lot of times players had to separate. There was an ejection really early. That's just a bummer, right? You never want a game to get to that point, but I like that rivalries are a thing, right? I like elevated stakes, like when teams don't like each other. I haven't watched the Pistons post-game video yet, but I wonder specifically what they talked about from this one because, they talked a big game after the game in Detroit about this being a big one. They were looking forward to it. The Pacers played well. That was Siakam's point after the game, right? The team that wins is going to feel good about their chatter level and how intense it was, and the Pacers certainly have to, right? Their offense was great. Siakam was great, and they matched that Pistons intensity and were ready to go in all those moments, but they were, Myles Turner was doing this to signal that Isaiah Stewart's just talk at one point. And obviously Thomas Bryant was really pumped when he got ejected from the game. Those are just a lot of emotional moments and, loud baskets for the Pacers, run-stopping plays that made for a really dramatic game full of what? Wow, what's going on here? So this certainly escalated to a point above what I thought. Some players on the Pacers mentioning that potentially a verbal line got crossed without saying any more details on who it was or what was said. But regardless, That could be grounds for a crescendo and look ahead to the next Pacers-Pistons game. Unfortunately, for those of you who like this drama kind of stuff, there's not another one this season. The next one will be next season, unless there's a postseason game or a play-in game or something to that effect. This season series is over, which is potentially good because it was escalated quite quickly. And at times it was very fun. At times these chippy kind of physical games can be fun, but this clearly was something else. I mean, there was just a lot of chatter from two teams that just played a game where they showed they didn't like each other. So that was all very fun. I have no real takeaways from it. I mean, Isaiah Stewart's not a fake tough guy. He was certainly over the top with his aggression in this game, but not fake. Willing to yap down by 14. Like, you got to respect that, even though it didn't help his team very much. Pistons did flow back into the game a few times and keep the scoreboard close, but it was never enough. And the Pacers deserve credit for their composure too. That's something Tyrese Haliburton discussed after the game, is that he felt like they did a good job staying composed through all that, outside of maybe Turner's grab of Hardaway Jr. in transition, or Beasley in transition. They did a really good job keeping it together and getting a win, and an important one for the tiebreakers at that. But a lot of guys chipped in and stepped up in meaningful ways with Nembhard and Mathurin. Now, that is how I want to close out today's Locked On Pacers. Before we do that, though, we need to talk about game time. Attending NFL playoff games, NBA games, anything is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together. There's so much excitement and energy, especially in those NFL playoff games or the Super Bowl. And games you attend can have that equal energy and excitement. You can be looking forward to making new memories this season. Game Time will help you do it because they have a new feature called Game Time Picks that'll filter out the fluff. Only show you incredible ticket deals on great seats. You don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You can use it to find, like I said, NFL playoff tickets, or you can browse through their super deals, which are equally impressive, and they show you the best value for the event. They have other awesome features like their seat view feature and all-in pricing and on-time delivery, lowest price guarantee. They give you the peace of mind you need to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Make Locked On Pistons your second listen. Kuka Hill will have his thoughts on this game and how the Pistons played and what the Pacers did to exploit their defense. 133 points. I thought this was going to be a blowout for the Pacers. They were up like 18-4 early, and their defense looked great to start this game, which was very impressive to me. Pacers were up over 15 points early in this one. In the first couple possessions of the night, the Pacers forced a 24-second violation on great defense, and then not long after forced an 8-second violation in the backcourt with awesome high-pressure defense. And I thought, man, if they can buy in and lock in like that, they could defend their way to a win here. And they didn't do that. The Pistons recovered, but that start to the game was everything, right? Pacers win this game by 14, right? They were up 18-4 and 4.5 minutes. And that's when the Pistons took their first time out of the game, right? That 14-point gap was the difference. That start where they did defend well was very important because their defense did fall off as the game went on. But lots of stuff that you'd worry about if you knew going into a game like this that Nembhard and Nesmith wouldn't, my gosh, I always pair them in my head. Nembhard and Mathurin wouldn't play. The Pacers were able to overcome it, right? That starting five with both those two guys has defended very well. The Pacers needed to match that. They did to start this game. But I bring that up to say that something else I said yesterday about defense was Andrew Nembhard guarding Cade is going to be really important. I mean, he was huge in Detroit in game 3 of this regular season series between these two teams. With the way he defended Cunningham, he forced turnovers and missed shots, and all of a sudden he's not available. So now they have to find someone else to put on him. And Ben Mathurin, who could have been one of the candidates for that, he's a good on-ball defender, also out. He had an illness. A back injury is what sidelined Nembhard. So they were missing two key pieces of their starting five. And you could argue which end that those two are more important on, but they handle the ball, right? And that's a big deal because all of a sudden the Pacers are down to 3 clear primary ball handlers in McConnell, Haliburton, and Siakam for this game. So they had to get clever with who they were playing and how. They started with Ben Shepherd and Aaron Nesmith, but then Jarris Walker would come in for Ben Shepherd pretty quickly in the first and third quarter, so each half. They had to be cautious of how they got the right ball handling and right defense on the floor, but it worked, right? Ben Shepherd, he guarded Cade all night. I thought it would be Aaron Nesmith, but he's perhaps it's because he's still recovering, although he did play over 32 minutes in this game. They had Nesmith on Tobias Harris instead. Regardless of the specifics of that matchup, like I thought the Pacers found ways to do well with Ben Shepherd, and Cade played a good game. His stat line, 12 for 22, 9 assists, 4 turnovers for 32 points, 9 assists. Crazy, right? He was still very, very good. He does so much for the Pistons, but his defense wasn't really there. He was a minus 23. 4 turnovers kind of sunk him, and the Pacers still gave him just enough fits. And Ben Shepherd deserves a ton of credit for that. His principles on defending screens, whether he needed to switch or drop or 2 guys are going up to him with the ball, were all perfect. Very crisp, very sharp on that end of the floor from Shepherd. So they found a different way to limit Cade without Nembhard. And then in terms of ball handling to make up for what they lost without Nembhard, Mathurin, you can't really get that back, but they needed guys to just kind of attack and make stuff happen. And a lot of people did that with good ball movement. 2 assists for Thomas Bryant, 2 assists for Jarris Walker, 3 for Myles Turner, 4 for Pascal Siakam, 2 for Aaron Nesmith. None of those numbers are like exceptional, blow you away kind of numbers, but they're solid figures, right? The Pacers had a nice passing game in that way and found a way to, with less ball handling, still attack the basket and make plays. A lot of times that was with their passing and their transition work, but they deserve a lot of credit for that. So 2 things they had to overcome just due to injury were no Nembhard and no Mathurin, and they found ways to slow Cade, not deter Cade, but slow Cade, and they found a way to still keep scoring and playing the way that they want. It was a very, very impressive win in that way. Injuries really derailed them earlier in the season, but credit where credit's due. They got over it in this game. They didn't get over zone. They had some trouble seeing a zone in the third quarter of this game. TJ McConnell, let's get back to him. He was awesome. He was 7 for 9 in the first half of this game. He did not score or make a shot. He didn't make a shot in the second half. Yeah, he didn't score at all. And they needed him to be great in that first half that they had, because like I said, they're missing 2 key ball handlers. Someone has to fill that void. Someone has to be able to get to the basket, get guys in motion. 3 steals, 3 assists, 6 boards for McConnell. He also had 4 turnovers, which I'm sure is something he would like back, but 14 for him, given how he's been playing, is an exceptional night. 7 for 13. They needed a bench guy to create for everybody else, and TJ McConnell certainly did that. So those, to me, are the biggest personnel changes from injuries and how it affected the way the Pacers played. I'd like to shout out a few things. Ben Shepherd, number 1, gets the first one for me. He was 4 for 6 in this game on threes. I think every one of them was like so timely. Like the Pistons had just cut it to 6 or 4 or something, and the Pacers run out, and they find Ben Shepherd for an open corner 3 early in the possession. I thought he was very good. In this one, he started next to Nesmith, like I said earlier, and I think that lineup looked okay. TJ McConnell, exceptional, like I said, 7 for 13 with 14 points, 3 assists. That's great. He stole Obi Toppin's powers. Obi Toppin, not his best game. 0 points 1 point in this one. Didn't make or attempt a shot. Only 1 rebound, minus 18. Pascal Siakam was amazing, which is why his plus minus is so high, but also it's in part because the lineups with Toppin out there were not very good in this game. He didn't contribute a ton. Thomas Bryant was physical and battling, which he needed to be with Beef Stew and the physical Piston centers out there. He played another very good game. He's just fit in so well. I'm going to have a story about him either right before or right after the trade deadline. So lots of guys did something of note in this game, whether that was good or bad. But the Pacers found a way to get it done. Pascal Siakam carried them across the finish line, and they are 26-21 win behind where I said they'd be at this point when I did my preseason win projection. So credit to the Pacers for that. Tomorrow on this very podcast, Eddie Garrison's going to join us. We're going to talk about All-Stars, who did or did not make it for the Pacers. We'll find out on Thursday and go from there. Looking forward to that. And then we'll talk Pacers Hawks after it ends over the weekend. You can find me on Twitter or Blue Sky at Tony R. East. And this podcast is on Twitter at Locked On Pacers. That's the best way to reach me and tell me if I said something dumb or that you totally disagree with. Tomorrow, talking Pacers All-Star selections or lack thereof with Eddie Garrison. Till then, everybody, have a wonderful day.